My girlfriend cheated on me for the dumbest reason. I can't believe it. Let me start off. In high school there was this girl that had a crush on me and eventually asked me out. She couldn't believe it after I agreed because she always mentioned that I am out of her league. I would always tell her that it's not important and that I love her, or else why would I agree on a date, right? The date went great and we stayed together until she was 22 female and I was 23 male. We both have decent paying jobs and we are living in a house and we were planning to get married, etc. The thing I didn't like was that she still always mentioned that I was out of her league. I told her I wasn't comfortable with that and I asked her why she would always mention it. She said that she was scared I would cheat on her. I will describe my life. No female friends, just 5 best friends since my childhood. I don't go partying, and if I would go I would never go without my girlfriend. I usually go 2 to 3 times a week without her with my buddies, mostly to the gym. She does go partying without me, but I don't really mind because I have trust in her and I am not this kind of jealous partner. She would always come back at around 3 a.m. but I would usually be sleeping because I have work at 5 a.m. I am pretty active in Instagram and I would always post pics of me with my buddies or my girlfriend or just pictures of me on the holidays. I would have many people in my DMs but I would always ignore them, tell them I have a girlfriend or just block them. Now one day I was at the gym with my friends and one of them invited me to his house because we were very tired. He asked me to stay for the night and I agreed. I immediately told my GF and sent her my location. She just read it and everything went on normal. So the other day she came home later than usual, around 4:30 a.m. I was awake because I had to go work. After I saw her I just asked why she came so late and she answered with, "I have just forgotten the time." I didn't think much about it and went to work. Later that day I got a message from her saying that we have to talk. I just said that I have to work and I am coming home later. Later that day I came home and she was sitting on the couch crying. I thought someone died and I went to comfort her. I asked her what's wrong and she told me that the day she came late, she had hooked up with her ex. I just looked at her and then asked, why? She said that she is insecure because I'm out of her league and that she is pretty sure that I have cheated too at least once. I just continued looking at her and I said that I needed a moment and I ran out of the house. I didn't know what to do so I just went outside and drove away. I am not an emotional person so I didn't really cry but I was just thinking the whole time, she effing cheated on me. After I came back home I saw her just acting like everything is normal and she tried to give me a kiss but I refused. I don't know what to do right now. I told her that I am staying at my friend's for a few days. What should I do? What's the worst thing you've seen a family member do, but have kept quiet about? One day I was walking by my parents' room when I noticed that the door was open. This was a little weird, so I peeked in and saw my dad on his computer. He was viewing screenshots of different news anchors' body parts. Nothing outrageous, just their thighs mostly. But there was an insane amount of this. I don't know what site or platform my dad was on, but he kept clicking and the images of thighs in tight clothing just kept popping up. Here's the kicker. My mom doesn't have legs. She was in a terrible car accident a few years ago, and she now gets around in a wheelchair. I wasn't sure if my mother knew about my dad's strange obsession or not, but I quickly noped out of that room and went somewhere else. A few days later, I came home reeking of a certain recreational plant when my father stopped me from entering the house. He's always been a very strict dude, with a military background to boot. I knew what he was going to tell me because he'd said it before, that I was not allowed back into his roof smelling like this. I needed to find some other sorry place to take a shower, and only then could I return. He started his little tirade with the question, "What is this?" Though, and I couldn't resist taking the bait. "Well, I can tell you that it's not a Google search of your favorite news anchor's thighs," I said snappily, definitely still buzzed. I never would have said that in my conscious mind but, as soon as I said that, there was a little bit of dead silence. Then, my stone-faced father turned around, walked back into the house. I went inside and took a shower, and neither of us have ever spoken about it since. My racist meal threw out hundreds of dollars of Indian ingredients, but I fought back. Due to some circumstances, my mother-in-law had to move in with my husband and me for a while. I come from a South Asian background, while my husband is white. I absolutely love Indian food. It's what I grew up eating, and even now, it's my favorite cuisines. At the same time my mother-in-law moved into our home, I got a pretty significant promotion which came with much more flexibility. I was suddenly able to work from home 4 days a week, and I found myself with much more time to cook. Wanting to share my favorite meals with my family, I filled my kitchen with rice, different spices, and all the ingredients I needed to make the dishes I craved. Keep in mind that all of this was new. Western and Eastern spices have very little overlap, so I spent money from my own account to buy around $100 in ingredients, which is the price I managed to get after couponing. My husband heard about my plans to make new dishes and was incredibly supportive. He even asked me to make specific meals. However, my mother-in-law is a different story. She has never really liked me, and she makes comments that can be hurtful. For instance, she would insult my entire culture and say things like, "Why do you eat with your hands? Normal people use a knife and spoon." My husband has defended me in the past, but living with her is starting to wear him down. As soon as she moved in, the complaints started pouring in. She asked why our kitchen smelled so strong, why I was feeding her son ethnic food, why I couldn't be normal. My husband tried to talk to his mom about it, but she didn't listen. Then, yesterday morning, I entered the kitchen and opened my pantry. It was empty. All my rice, spices, flour, everything was gone. Even my rice dispensing machine, which I had for years, had vanished. My mother-in-law didn't even try lie that she was the one who threw it all out to teach me a lesson. I was livid. I knew I couldn't kick her out, but I could make her do worse. She wasn't ready for what I told her next. Go to part 2. My racist meal threw out hundreds of dollars of Indian ingredients, but I fought back. Part 2 halves. After spending a quarter of my private account to buy a stock of Indian food so I could give my husband and mother-in-law the food that I grew up with, I was furious to discover that my mother-in-law had thrown every single thing out. Besides the basics like milk, bread, butter, jam, and eggs, there was nothing left. My mother-in-law confessed to throwing it away herself, casually saying that she did what was best for the family by ensuring that I didn't give them all diarrhea with my cooking, which was unnecessary and hurtful. My husband took my side, telling his mom that she had gone too far, especially since she chose to throw everything out on garbage day. In other words, everything was truly gone. However, I still had my receipts. It turned out that I had spent over $150 purchasing new flour, rice, spices, and equipment for us to make the food. I showed her the receipt and in no unclear terms, told her that she would have to repay me. Immediately, she went quiet and told me that she couldn't do that. She even asked her son to pay for her, but I'm the breadwinner in our family, and my husband's savings are incredibly meager as he's saving up to buy himself a new console, so we were able to unify and tell his mom that she needed to pay me back. But the reason she's staying with us in the first place was because she was evicted from her apartment. She couldn't afford to pay me back, couldn't afford to move out, and couldn't even afford to feed herself, so I told her that, since I was feeling generous, I would be purchasing some Indian ingredients again. However, since she wasted my money, I wanted her to pay us back in labor, which is why, tonight, my mother-in-law will be cooking traditional Indian curry and bread, all from scratch. I already know she's going to mess it up on purpose, but I can't wait to watch her cook the food she hates so much. Harass me after your son abandoned me and our 2 children? Have fun ever seeing your grandchildren again, Mill. My life after college was incredibly tough. My college boyfriend, who I shared 2 children with, left me at the altar, and I was forced to pick up the ruined pieces of my life alone. Still, I fought hard to create a good life for myself and my children. I went back to school, got a higher degree, and am now the youngest member on the executive board at a very well-paying company. My mother-in-law, however, hated my success. She tracked me down at my new house, which I was living in with my new boyfriend at the time, and started shouting at me for daring to date around years after my ex left me at the altar. She called me a hussy, said I was a terrible role model, and once I told her that her words meant nothing to me, she said that she was my children's grandmother, and there was nothing I could do about that. As this scene was unfolding, my beautiful girls, who were 3 and 6 at the time, had already gone inside with my fiancé. All 3 of them crept outside when they heard the shouting, and then my mother-in-law heard my girls refer to my new boyfriend as dad. This infuriated her. She started screaming about how the only dad they had was my ex, but my ex hadn't even bothered to try to forge his presence in their lives. He was a real piece of work. He relied on his mommy to fight his battles, never answered his phone, didn't have a job, didn't pay child support, and couldn't even remember our youngest daughter's birthday or how to spell our older child's middle name. Can you believe it? My boyfriend and I actually laughed at my mother-in-law when she said that, though she wasn't even my technically mother-in-law because my ex and I never married. After she kept insisting that there was nothing I could do about her being the grandmother of my children, I finally replied to her, "Nothing I can do about it, huh? Well, let's see about that." She was not ready for what I had planned. Go to part 2. Harass me after your son abandoned me and our 2 children? Have fun ever seeing your grandchildren again, Mill. Part 2 halves. After my mother-in-law, who technically wasn't my mother-in-law because my ex and I never married, shouted at me for daring to move on with my life, I became determined to cut her out. I was initially willing to allow her to be in my daughter's lives because she was, technically, their grandmother, even if I hated her son and refused to let a man who didn't even try for custody be around my girls, but I decided to cut my kindness. See, up until that point, I had intentionally stayed in the same state as my mother-in-law and her son just in case my girls ever asked to see their biological father. But once they had started calling my new boyfriend dad all on their own and after the tantrum my mother-in-law pulled, I didn't see the point. There was no reason to hang around. So, I moved out of the house I had and used the money I got to place a down payment on a new house on the other side of the country. The new house had a pool, bigger rooms for my daughters, and it only an hour away from Disney. My girls loved it there. My mother-in-law kept calling and I allowed her to speak to the girls once a week if they also wanted to, and the old lady kept trying to talk my girls into asking me to move back. But not only did my girls love the new house, they actually stood up to my mother-in-law for me and said that they liked not having to see her around anymore. Did I have to teach them a lesson afterwards in what is appropriate to say to adults and what isn't? Yes, but was I incredibly proud and grateful to my girls for sticking up to their bully of a grandmother like that? You bet. 8 years later, that guy is no longer my boyfriend. He's my husband and a better father to my girls than my college ex ever could have been. Sometimes, for fun, I invite their grandmother to Thanksgiving dinner because I know she can't afford the plane ride here, and when she never shows up, everyone in my house is grateful for it. You want me fired because I won't sleep with you? Have fun explaining these recordings. I landed my first job in marketing at one of the top firms in the country. For reference, I've always been considered good looking, and I even used to model a bit for certain low-end clothing brands. Still, when I started this job, I never expected the kind of attention I would get from my boss's boss. The guy's name was Josh, and he would constantly hit on me, inviting me to lunches, dinners, and even his weekend home. It was so uncomfortable, and I always had to turn him down because the power dynamics were insanely skewed in his favor. Was Josh attractive? Sure. Did I want to get caught up in an office relationship at my first job ever? Not at all. But one day, While we were in the car, Josh took it a step further. He put his hand on my thigh, telling me in no unclear terms that I could advance quickly if I spent the weekend with him. For reference, this during a company retreat in another country. There was no way I could go home or really back out gracefully. It was beyond inappropriate. Thankfully, I had the presence of mind to record the entire conversation on my phone after my brother advised me to be more careful around Josh. After that incident, I distanced myself from him. He didn't really seem to care about my repeated rejections because he kept continuing to make innuendos and inappropriate comments around me. I ignored it as best as I could, kept recording whenever I knew I would be alone with him, and was able to relax after the retreat ended. 3 months later, it was time for my performance review, and my immediate supervisor was there too. As we sat down, I could sense something was off. They started criticizing me, saying I wasn't a good fit nor a team player. I was shocked when they informed me that they were terminating my employment. But after everything Josh put me through, I was not going to back down. Go to part 2. You want me fired because I won't sleep with you? Have fun explaining these recordings. Part 2 halves. After dealing with harassment from Josh for months on end and having to reject him at every turn, I was furious when my company tried to fire me during my performance review. Not only were the flaws they pointed out in my performance completely irrelevant and ridiculous, but I knew that the human resources employee present had seen me be harassed by Josh in the past. I knew at once that I was only being fired because I rejected him and that this was his way of showing authority over me, but at that moment, I took a stand. I grabbed the paperwork they wanted me to sign, but instead of signing it, I pushed it to the side. Then, I pulled out my phone and played recording after recording of Josh's inappropriate advances. The human resources manager and my supervisor were speechless. I looked at them, waiting for a response, and they told me that they had to discuss some more things. They quickly left the room, and I sat there in the conference room, waiting for the HR manager to return. I had no clue what was going to come next, so I started recording on my phone again. An hour later, the human resources manager came back with Josh. They tried to intimidate me, claiming that recording private conversations was illegal and threatening to file charges, but I had already researched the law and knew it wasn't. I then informed them that I was recording this conversation, too, and that I now had evidence of them trying to manipulate me by lying about the law. I threatened to go to the press, knowing anyone would jump at the chance to expose such misconduct in a huge company like this. 3 days later, I found myself signing a non-disclosure agreement and receiving a check that covered all the debt I had accrued from law school. It's unfortunate that the person who harassed me wasn't fired, but I at least received compensation for putting up with his inappropriate behavior. Long story short, record your conversations. You never know when it'll come in handy. I hate my wife's BFF, and I'm thinking of divorcing her over this. I hate my wife's, Katie, BFF, let's call her Lisa. Some backstory. I met my wife when we were in high school and we had the same friend group. After a few months of knowing Katie, I fell in love with her. I ended up confessing my love for her. Since then we went on many dates. We dated for about 6 years and then I proposed to her. We both were extremely happy with each other. We told our family and friends. Lisa, my wife, has known since they were 7 years old, wasn't so happy or congratulated us. At that time I didn't think of why she wasn't happy that her BFF got engaged. My wife asked Lisa to be her maid of honor. After 4 years of our marriage I noticed that my wife for some odd reason changed her mind about a lot of stuff. For some reason Lisa started to visit my wife 3 to 4 days per week, but after every time Lisa visited us, me and my wife would have a disagreement over small things like her wanting to become a housewife and that I have a problem with it. I don't have an issue with it whatsoever. After 2 months my wife moved back in with her parents for some space. After she came back out of nowhere she stopped trusting me with simple tasks. After Katie became pregnant since May of this year, I noticed that when Lisa came to our house my wife started to change. A month ago I came home early and I couldn't help myself but overhear their conversations without their knowledge, and I heard Lisa talking bad about me and telling my wife that she should abort the baby, so the baby's sign wouldn't be Aquarius. My wife is a Cancer sign. My heart broke when I heard my wife saying that she will consider doing that, but since I trust my wife I said nothing. But after a month she talked to me about aborting the baby, and I disagreed with her and she said nothing. Yesterday I noticed that my wife lost a lot of weight. She broke down sobbing, telling me that she aborted the baby a week ago without telling me. I was livid at what she said, so I shouted at her and told her she shouldn't listen to all of Lisa's bull crap, and she started defending Lisa, saying that I shouldn't talk about her BFF like that. I ended up yelling at her more, saying that Lisa did nothing but brainwash her. I ended up packing all of my stuff and asking my older brother if I could stay with him for a few weeks. I told him everything and now I'm thinking of divorcing my wife over this. Today I messed up when I offered my coworker a ride home. Last night I offered one of my coworkers a ride home after work. My coworker is an intern, an attractive intern, not gonna lie. However, I've never been tempted to cross that line because A, we work together, and B, the age gap. That being said, despite my professional and platonic relationship with my coworker, I still managed to end up in a temporary love triangle somehow. To pick up where I left off in my opening line, she accepted my offer to drop her off at her apartment when we were done working. On our way, she answered a phone call from her boyfriend. I had no idea what the boyfriend was saying, but based on my coworker's unexpectedly candid responses, it became obvious that her boyfriend was upset at her for posting a photo on social media of her drinking somewhere with random guys. My coworker explained that the random guys actually worked with her and the photos were taken during our monthly office party. She apologized for not telling her boyfriend about it before posting the pictures, but she refused to apologize for enjoying drinks with colleagues. The conversation between my coworker and her BF became more and more heated. especially when she started using words like insecure, immature and jealous to respond to her boyfriend. I was doing my best to not look like I was eavesdropping, even though it was impossible not to. At some point during the argument, I low-key had to use made-up sign language to communicate to my coworker that I didn't know where I was going and that she was supposed to be navigating the way to her apartment. She was listening to her boyfriend talking at that moment, but she had no problem giving me verbal instructions at the same time. The boyfriend must have realized his girlfriend was in the car with a person of interest because my coworker's next response to him was nope, not in an Uber. One of the guys at work offered to drive me home. She listened and listened and listened while shaking her head and rolling eyes before opening her mouth and suddenly saying yes. He is one of the guys in the effing photo. In fact, he's the tall guy on the far left with the cute dimples. It was literally the first compliment I've gotten from the opposite gender about my looks since my girlfriend broke up with me a couple of years ago. I was so caught off guard with the cute dimples line that I momentarily stopped focusing on the road and stared at my coworker with deer in headlights eyes. My coworker hung up on her boyfriend and said I just missed the turn off. What was supposed to be a 10-minute drive to my coworker's apartment turned into a 25-minute journey because of my lack of concentration. The boyfriend called again a few minutes later and my coworker had to explain to him why she was still on the road and not at home yet. I didn't have to hear what my coworker's boyfriend was saying to know that he did not like the fact that his girlfriend was still with the cute dimples guy. My coworker eventually became so frustrated. She switched to Danish mid-argument, her native language. I think she assumed I wouldn't understand what she was saying, but I did. My best friend is Scandinavian. When we got high together, he never spoke English, which kind of forced me to learn what he was talking about. My coworker, now speaking Danish to her boyfriend, apologized for upsetting him and said that he had no reason to feel threatened because she would never cheat on him with anyone, especially not with the guys at work. So, there I was, still high on the cute dimples compliment, when I heard my coworker roast all the guys she worked with, including me. I guess she was doing it to convince her boyfriend that he was better than us and kind of boost his ego in the process because she really made us sound bad. She said I never blink my eyes and that I walk like I'm riding an invisible bicycle. On top of that, she said my voice was so husky it made her feel like she needed to clear her throat every time she heard me talk. The tension between my coworker and her boyfriend died down because she was laughing and talking dirty in Danish. When I finally made it to her apartment, I didn't even bother saying goodnight. All I did was smile and wave before leaving. I wish I never offered to drive her home. That was an uncomfortable experience. Monday is going to be awkward at the office for me.